Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's Go Wellness Practice Accelerator Challenge. I am one of your hosts, Annie Asher. I'm joined with the amazing Dr. Dan Kellams. Dan, how are you today?
I'm wonderful. I'm happy.
It's so good to have you back.
Yeah, it's been a crazy last few weeks. So happy to be here today.
Good. Well, before we get started on all the beautiful teaching you're going to get going on, I just wanted to go over some announcements. Just wanted to remind everybody that session 4, I can't believe we're already on session 4, will be December 2nd and 3rd. It's going to be up in Midway, Utah at the amazing Zermatt Lodge. It's not too far from where we had the last event. That hotel was sadly booked for the dates that we needed, but we found an even better option. So win-win. If you guys like magical mountain wonderfulness, then it's going to be great. So Dan, we're going to talk autoimmune today, huh?
We are going to do a down and dirty about autoimmune today. So should be really fun. I'm going to hit some really key concepts. So there's some key piece I want to talk about with epitope. There's a very particular autoimmune process that happens called epitope spreading. So just going to introduce the concept today and kind of give people some brain candy. I know we have a lot of clients that are dealing with autoimmune cases, and autoimmune can be it can be a little disruptive in a way that it messes with your typical treatment protocols because it can bounce all over the place. There's a couple different concepts that we have to keep in mind. One is autoimmunity can occur with any type of immune cell. So you can get overproduction, overactivity of pretty much any type of immune cell that there is. But there are some basic concepts that you'll typically see over and over again. So when we're dealing with an autoimmune case, and you'll find those antibodies. Now, antibodies, and this is something I really want to focus on today, is the antibody production, that process. When we lose what we call self-tolerance. So our body no longer recognizes our own tissue as, being natural or to the internal environment. So when we're getting this, there's a couple different mechanisms that occur. So one is you can have molecular mimicry from an antigen like a virus or a microbe. And there's a lot that can go wrong, like Epstein-Barr. I've talked about that quite a bit. The idea, regardless if you're talking, I'm going to draw this up, regardless if you're talking about antibodies developing from molecular mimicry, from food proteins, from any type of microbial protein, or some type of chemical, there's a few things that can happen. So the one thing that's a little bit different with chemicals, this is where we got to be very careful with it, is if a chemical binds to like BPA, a plastic, or some other toxin, if a chemical binds to any of our tissue, it alters that tissue. And now the tissue now looks like a foreign invader. And so you can develop immune antibodies to your own tissue because chemicals bind to the tissue and create something called a neoantigen or a new antigen. So the body starts to think that these things are like foreign to our body. So one of the things that can happen is, so really, and this is a really key piece, is thinking about like amino acids. So I'm just going to draw generically, just think of this as this is just a generic example of an amino acid sequence. So one, and a key concept here is that you can develop an antibody to your own tissue due to molecular mimicry, or what's called cross-reactivity. Molecular mimicry and cross-reactivity are the same thing. So first, what is that concept? The concept is if you have an amino acid sequence in a protein, like a food protein, and if that, let's say this is, corn, and it is not. This is an example. I don't know the amino acid sequence of corn, but let's say corn happens to have this amino acid sequence. And let's say your myelin basic protein has a similar structure where these link up. If your immune system develops an antibody to this sequence, if that sequence occurs in any of your tissues in your body, you're going to develop that antibody can then bind to your tissue. That's what's called cross-reactivity. That's also molecular mimicry. So it's the same thing. So the sequence adds up. Okay. So this can happen with a food protein. So if we're talking food, so we're going to talk about foods and we're going to talk about microbes and then what to do with each. If it's a food protein, the most important thing to keep in mind is your body will not have an immune response to a single amino acid. It has to be a chain of aminos, and that's called an epitope, which is EPITOPE. So if you have this sequence is called an epitope, and that's what your body's going to make that antibody to. But if you're eating your food and it's being properly broke down, so the food comes down in single or a pair of 2 or 3 aminos or just one, because your digestive enzymes, all your digestive secretions, your bile acid, your HCl from your stomach, and all your pancreatic enzymes, they emulsify and break down those foods thoroughly enough. And if we chew good enough, then we're going to break down this protein so there's no amino sequence for us to have an immune reaction to, or less of one. So that's a really key concept. So even if someone has a broken barrier, let's say they have transcellular or paracellular hyperpermeability, it doesn't matter if those aminos are getting in because there's not a full protein, right? Because one, you need the full protein to have the epitope sequence, but also your immune system can't see anything under 5,000 Daltons. And an amino is too small, whereas a protein is a large molecule.
Hey everybody, Reagan Archibald here. I hope you enjoyed the Go Wellness show and maybe learned a couple things you could apply to your practice. If you're a healthcare entrepreneur who wants to work in an academic think tank with like-minded humans who are just like you, looking to provide better service, better quality of care for your patients, reach us at info@gowellness.com and we're happy to do a free practice analysis for you.